I'm going to hand over to Dave now. Over to you, Dave.
Thanks, James. So first of all, thanks to James and Andrew and all the great people that organize APS every year. It's always great to be here. Yeah, I'm aware that a big part of the session is reserved for QA, and people might have a lot of questions that they want to ask and get answered. But first, I wanted to dive a little bit into something that that has been coming up a lot as we talk to new clients and onboard new partners at YummyCube. And that is, people are coming to us saying, we're running A/B testing, we're using all these platforms, we're experimenting with new creative for our app. But when we actually put the creatives, when we put the new variants live in front of all of our traffic, why doesn't conversion go up? What's happening? What's the problem? We thought these performed better than what we had. And so there are a number of reasons for this, and we wanted to dive into some of them right here. And again, we'll have plenty of time for QA after we talk a little bit about A/B testing. So first, as a marketer, generally speaking, would you agree with this statement? All users from all channels behave the same way. Now, I know what you're probably thinking, and most people don't agree. Most people's answer is no. We took a brief survey, and about 100% of the people that we work with said no. But what's curious is a lot of marketers are running A/B testing, particularly in mobile, as if the answer to that question is yes. And that's leading to a lot of problems when it comes to actual results when you put your learnings from A/B testing in the wild in either store. I think one of the first challenges that we always see in organizations when it comes to A/B testing are that there are cross-functional barriers between teams that are responsible generally for performance. In some organizations, you have kind of organic marketing and product marketing teams, and then separately you have growth marketing and user acquisition teams. And each of these teams are running their own A/B tests. They're looking at the channels that they're responsible for. And the challenge is in the App Store and Play Store, as we all know, there's only one landing page. And that landing page is shared by all traffic across all channels. And what we've found is the most successful organizations have very, very healthy and productive collaborations across these teams because they recognize that there are different learnings that you can get in terms of what performs inside the store versus what might perform outside for a user acquisition channel, and how to make these things blend together so that everyone wins. The truth is, you can't simply buy victory. A lot of, there are some marketers who are very focused on organic. There are some marketers that are very focused on paid user acquisition. And of course, paid user acquisition is incredibly important for scale. But the truth is that for any app to succeed in a massive way, organics are necessary to push the blended cost of customer acquisition down. This is how large apps can afford to pay more for user acquisition, because they have so many organics coming in, making the business work, essentially allowing them to increase their buying power when they're looking at paid user acquisition. And so, the typical app at scale that we see that's successful might receive 40 or 50% of its traffic organically or more if it's well optimized. But ignoring kind of this balance between what works on the organic side and what drives conversion and success on the paid side can really cost you the ability to scale your app. And this is, what one of the challenges that a lot of folks see. And, there's this kind of nightmare scenario that people always talk about where, they deploy an A/B test, they think it's going to work, but when it's actually deployed, the conversion drops and no one knows why. And everyone scrambles trying to figure out what happened, and they roll things back. Well, the truth is, I think there's a lot of built-in bias unknowingly when people are A/B testing. I think, when you're a growth team or when you're a product marketing team, you're generally looking at conversion in the context of the channel that you're managing. From a paid marketing standpoint, you might be focusing on optimizing yield for your paid traffic, whereas product marketers generally look at what's going on in the store. And the truth is that all A/B testing tools don't really serve all of these use cases, even though they may be marketed to serve all needs. User behavior across paid and organic in the store, outside of the store, is not the same. And so that needs to be addressed in any A/B testing strategy. A lot of people always ask when I talk about this, what do you mean A/B testing doesn't suit certain use cases? Well, obviously you want to A/B test in every scenario. You want to let data guide you in terms of the decisions that you make and how you optimize your marketing. But the truth is, how you A/B test needs to be customized for the use case that you're targeting. When you look at organic in the App Store and Play Store, you're competing based on relevance, right? You're competing to earn that click and download action, and other apps that are listed above and below you in whatever search result or whatever list you're featured on really influence that choice that happens in the store. Now, that's not saying relevance isn't important for paid user acquisition as well. It definitely is. But once the user lands on your store listing, they've already been influenced by your ad and by the media that they saw. And they're a captive audience reviewing more information about your app before they decide to download. And a choice where users are a captive audience is a very different user behavior than when users are looking at a competitive situation and they're choosing whether to download your app or someone else's. In the store, you only get about 6 seconds before someone decides to download your app. You look at all of the studies people do about user behavior on their store listing and how much time people spend on the store listing before they download. And the reality is, particularly when you look at the App Store, but also to some extent on Google Play, people are downloading directly from the search result. There is no interaction with your store listing on the organic side. Your listing is what appears here in the search result before people decide to download. And so, when you look at how to convert, you have to look at not only your internal factors, but also your external factors in terms of light mode versus dark mode and who's featured above and below you and how you stand out in contrast to those choices. In addition to, the normal things that every marketer does, aligning their messaging and experimenting with colors and features. So this is a very important thing to keep in mind. User behavior, we find, even differs from one channel to another. Just like from a paid standpoint, you're going to use different ad creative in different channels, conversion generally also differs on your store listing from channel to channel because users are very different. The demographic of users who are using TikTok or Snapchat are very different than the demographic and user behavior of users that use Instagram or Facebook or Google ads or Apple search ads. And that's very important when you're thinking about what you want to optimize. It's important as a team across paid and organic to understand, well, where does the majority of our traffic come from? And what channel is most important to optimize and what channel is second most important to optimize, and how do we understand how they might perform differently and what kind of blends together in terms of works best for both audiences. And that's very, very important from an A/B testing standpoint to make this work. The store experiences are going to differ greatly. Apple licensed one-click technology from Amazon back in the days of iTunes. They still have that buy it now philosophy throughout their store, whereas Google has more of an add to cart experience. With Apple, you get only a few seconds to sell the consumer. With Google, people browse around, they might read, they might interact a little bit more. And so it's very important to keep that in mind when you're thinking of, well, am I trying to increase conversion on organic or paid? And am I trying to increase conversion on Apple or Google? Or maybe you're trying to solve the challenge about why one store is not performing as well as the other after you deployed creatives or a store listing that was supposed to perform better. So, with all those differences that I just outlined, we really have to think, why would it ever make sense to make decisions based on a single test using paid traffic from a single channel if you have an app at scale where you have more than one paid growth channel that's working for you and where your organics have scaled up? You have to look at this in a more complex way to win. And we know how we got here, right? Google offers testing capabilities on the store listing. Apple doesn't, but you can't segregate channels for testing. People kind of got used to an aggregate read. You can't test within search or browse on Google, and Apple is the exact opposite, right? There's limited testing in a search result. Search ads creative set testing is a great search optimization tool, but it doesn't really help you with paid channel optimization. And you can't really dynamically change assets. And people struggled for a while about what the solution for this challenge was. And what a lot of people came up with was simulated store listing testing. And obviously, this was originally conceived to support the Apple App Store. But today, it's being used as a multi-purpose tool to A/B test paid traffic in UA campaigns, to A/B test when it's impossible to get a new release live for people who need to move a little bit faster than their release engineers move every day, and to examine behavioral data and understand how users interact with a page. And all of that is very important, but it's important to understand what might go wrong with those kinds of tests. And more than 50% of the clients we speak with, their number one complaint about A/B testing is, what if it goes wrong? What if we deploy it and it turns out it doesn't work? Or maybe they've had that experience before in the past. And nobody wants, a decline in conversion and having to explain that to all of their colleagues when something goes live. So our question that we always ask our clients is, well, how were you running testing, right? What platforms were you using? What was your methodology to kind of break down and post-mortem what happened? And, one of the things that a lot of people don't do is they don't stratify conversion, right? They don't look at each individual source of traffic or type of traffic and understand how conversion differs. And obviously we're looking at an example from the App Store. The Google Play Store is slightly different, but they provide similar data. And often, when we're looking at these cases, what we actually see when you look at the channels broken down is that search and browse conversion declined, but conversion from app refer increased. And the reason that happened is because maybe someone was using, a virtual A/B testing platform. They had kind of a stand-up page they were driving traffic to. And, when they were driving Facebook traffic to that page, it looked like that traffic was converting better. But Facebook, when you look at the entire user acquisition funnel for all channels, might only be 30 or 40% of their user acquisition. And what happened is the other half, right, the other portion declined. And what improved was not enough to make the overall pie bigger. So, aggregate conversion rates can be an initial indicator. But the challenge is when you look at aggregate conversion rates for like a store listing, you're not really understanding what the individual drivers are behind that conversion rate and how those user behaviors behind each channel can really differ, right? Store browse is always going to have an infinitely lower conversion rate than search, which will have a different conversion rate than paid channels, depending on the quality of users you're driving in and the advertising experience in those channels. So, one of our clients literally came to us with this example. They said, well, we thought we were going to get an 8 or 9% win, but when we deployed in the store, it looked like our conversion rate dropped 2.5%. Why was that? And, this was before they started working with us, but this was one of the problems that we had to try to solve. And, one of the things that we always recognize when you're doing this kind of testing using kind of external testing platforms is also that paid ads can really influence outcomes. When you're thinking of an A/B test, and one of the things that people usually, roll out in an A/B test is they look at, what feature is more important to highlight, right? How do we want to prioritize our screenshots based on the functionality of our app? And, in this case, you're running a test with, diet plans versus exercise for this app Generis. And, when the tests were running, apparently we were using weight loss ads at the top, and that the app was using exercise driven ads at the bottom with screenshots that matched. And of course, when you're running A/B testing in an environment like that, you end up with two winners in a way, because you're aligning the user acquisition funnel for that channel. When what you really want to do is you really want to understand what set of screenshots is going to work best for all channels. And so that's a challenge. That's some built-in bias that ends up happening in a lot of these types of campaigns. The other thing that's very important is what converts in search is, or on a store listing, is not always what converts well in a search result. A lot of people don't realize this, or some people maybe don't think about it when they're running A/B tests, but conversion rates are not just measured on your store listing. They are measured for every keyword in the App Store and Google Play Store. They're measured on every list in the store. And those tap through rates determine your ranking on keywords. Apple says this when you read their documentation for search ads. That's why they give you tap through rate percentages within search ads, because that's a problem to optimize for and solve. And simulated store listings can't really help optimize conversion for that purpose. And the challenge is sometimes you'll deploy creative on your store listing and you'll have improved conversion there, but conversions against impressions in search go down. And that's because you have to kind of measure and test against these two different user experiences. From our perspective, when we're running this, we believe the best platform for A/B testing in search is Apple Search Ads. Creative set testing is a huge asset. And, a lot of people look at search ads and they talk about it as a channel for user acquisition, and they focus on ROAS, and kind of those are very important things to focus on. But what a lot of people don't realize is that search ads, even if you're not using it as one of your major marketing channels, is an excellent A/B testing platform. You're just buying the traffic from Apple instead of buying it from an external source. And the data from search ads consoles is critical to product marketing teams. One of the challenges that we find, particularly with enterprise companies, is that if the people running product marketing are different than the people running paid search, the product marketing team, for some reason, doesn't get access to the search ads dashboard and can't get access to this wealth of data about conversion per keyword and share of voice and all of these important things. And this is just another reason why it's important to, if you're not bringing the teams together, at least have collaboration within an organization so that this data can be shared and you can optimize across these different purposes. At GunnyCube, we don't necessarily think any of these testing approaches are bad in and of themselves. We leverage Google Play experiments all day long to test aggregate traffic on a store listing. We leverage search ads to test conversion within a search result. And we have a platform called SplitCube that we leverage as kind of a virtualized store listing to test conversion against paid traffic if we want to isolate a channel. And when you use the right platform for the right type of experiment, you generally get results that are reliable, that when you deploy it in the store, you see the result that you expect. But when you use one platform as kind of a one-size-fits-all strategy, for 2/3 of the challenges that you might be experiencing from a conversion perspective, you're not going to see the result that you think you're going to see. And so that's important to keep in mind. And there are a number of factors that drive conversion, and it's important to note that, in our experience, small changes, incremental changes can actually have an impact on conversion rates, but it depends on how you're running testing, whether you see those impacts. We find that, when you're using a virtual platform to create a stand-up page like SplitCube and drive traffic into that page, larger radical changes tend to be more obvious in terms of what's converting better. Smaller changes you don't kind of see as much. It's kind of a less sensitive test. You look at running a test inside search ads or Google experiments, you have increasing degrees of sensitivity toward smaller or incremental changes on your creative, and that's important to keep in mind. We always test using kind of a matrix of 4. There are color changes, color choices, and contrast that drive about 25% of successful A/B tests for us. Feature prioritization drives about 25% of successful tests for us. And again, when you're thinking about how to prioritize features, it's important to have correct data about what is going on in the store and what features might have the most demand. Otherwise, your optimization is not going to work. And not all tools out there are equal in terms of their efficacy with the search data in the tool. The first 3 screenshots are very important. changes in layout to your first 3 screenshots, at least in our experience, drives about 30% of successful A/B tests. And the value proposition has about 20% value. So, the text that you put in your screenshots and how legible it is and how it aligns with the way people are discovering or the way that you're marketing is really critical to success. We also want to always advise people whenever we talk to them to isolate changes. The value prop, color and contrast, layout, feature prioritization, each one of these things can move the needle on conversion individually. And if you don't isolate changes, you don't know what element actually worked, and you learn less about what you can carry through to your other marketing or help your colleagues in terms of what the learnings from a test and an update was. Using the same example that I showed you earlier with the Generous app, ultimately we tested 3 different screenshot variants when we got our hands on this challenge to kind of try to solve the problem, which one really is best. And ultimately, the 3rd variant really won when you look at kind of a stratified channel analysis and you say, okay, which one actually rises all tides, or which one might improve certain channels without creating a negative impact on other channels. And so that's extremely important. And had we done radical changes to each version of the 2 variants that we were testing, we might not have pulled out exactly what the issue was. Whereas in this case, we were able to. So we always ask our partners, whenever we talk to them, what is the conversion problem you're having? If A/B testing is why you're coming to us, why you're talking to us, what are we trying to solve? What is the best test method? Are we trying to increase the yield on paid spend, right? Well, in that case, virtual store test platforms are helpful. And we can, ensure that we're isolating traffic to a channel, provided that we're validating a winning variant is not a loser in other large channels. That's an important second validation step. We also want to make sure, if you're trying to improve keyword rankings, that we're leveraging search ads if you're live in the Apple App Store to run A/B testing and understand what converts better in a particular search result. And third, if you want to test blended traffic, Google Experiments is a great platform, but it doesn't perfectly emulate the App Store. So there's always adaptation you have to make between a winner on Google and what you ultimately put live on iOS. So there's plenty of time for Q&A. I know that was the purpose of this session, so I wanted to reserve a lot of time for that. But hopefully this presentation was useful and helpful for everyone, just in terms of what might be going right and wrong with an A/B testing strategy.
Great, thanks, Dave. Maybe you want to stop sharing your screen and we'll do a bit of questions. So, so is there somewhere people can find out a bit more about you? The website is the first place, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find out more about us at gummicube.com. We're also at Gummicube on Twitter. We're also on LinkedIn. And those are some of the best places to find us. We have a great blog where we have literally, I think, thousands of articles at this point about ASO and kind of all of the aspects of mobile marketing. And you can always reach out to me. I'm just Dave at gummicube.com.
Great. And so we do have some questions coming in. I had a quick one first, which was, we've seen a lot of stuff around A/B testing, split testing, and optimizing different stuff. But this idea of changing something as core as a value proposition, it's hard to sort of optimize your way to that. How do you come up with something new? Or, are you having to go into user research with clients, or do you have to do surveys or proper insight, or is it actually, no, you can normally brainstorm a few different ideas and just work with that?
We use search data. So, when we're looking at a value proposition, what we want to do is understand the features that an app has. And if there's a particular feature that we want to highlight, we want to understand, how do users describe this feature organically, right? How are they searching for it? And when they search, what are they looking for? And so what we try to do is we try to layer in search data. We try to layer in the actual language users use when they're describing that feature. And we find that those type of value propositions work better. And we work with a lot of brands too. We incorporate kind of the appropriate brand language into that value proposition. But we find generally, if you're not creating alignment with search, it doesn't work. And even if you're marketing in channels outside of search, you're marketing to users who are on the same device and they're thinking the same way.
Got it. And we have a question from Vitali, and he wants to know, what's the price for Split Cube?
What is the, sure. So it depends on whether you're looking for self-service or full service, but it starts at around $1,500 per month to use Split Cube.
Great. And thanks for being so transparent. And the question from Thomas Bui, who is a growth marketer at Striv. And he is asking, when running ASA, how do you approach keyword cannibalization? If you know you show on the first 3 results for specific keywords, do you still bid on that keyword just to present competitor biddings?
So if you already appear on the first 3 search results for a keyword, it means that your natural conversion rate is high enough to get you there, even if other people might be artificially increasing their conversion rate by driving additional clicks in through search ads. So the real question is, if you're ranked 2 or 3, do you want to be number 1? And if you do, you probably have to engage in search ads to do that. But the reality is you're probably getting 90% of the benefit by being in the top 3 anyway. And if you don't have to spend money to do that, good for you. And that's just kind of a discussion that we have to have in terms of what is the budget and do we have extra to invest there to get that last 10% of benefit.
Got it. And Stefan Grunwald, who is the head of ASO and CRO at Good Game Studios, I think they're based in Berlin or Germany. He's asking, how do you deal with the challenge of having paid traffic, either UAC or ASA, in your browse and search traffic reports from the consoles?
So first of all, we always combine reporting in kind of stratified layers. So we have reporting around where visibility comes from in the store that we get through our own DataCube technology. We have reporting from Apple and Google's developer console about search versus browse versus app refer versus web refer. And then we have campaign level data from an attribution tool. We also pull in data from search ads, and we pull in data from Google Ads if we're running a Google campaign, and then we strip out kind of the numbers that are coming from those 2 store channels from the channel that they're rolled up in as Apple or Google reports them, and we get 95 to 98% accuracy when we do that based on kind of all the campaigns we see and kind of what we know about those channels. And we have some technology that automatically does that when we break that out for reporting for partners. We also look at organic coefficients, by the way. So it's not just about stripping out, for example, Apple search ads from organic search. It's also about understanding how Apple search ads influences organic search. And, if you were to turn that off or reduce it by 50%, would that layer of your cake get a little bit slimmer? And so that's important to consider as well.
Great. And Pian Wu is asking, she's from Tandem, which is a language exchange app. She's asking, do you have experience of keyword optimization in the Chinese market? As far as I know, most ASO tools have less reliable data when it comes to keyword traffic or optimization in China. Any suggestions for that market?
Yes, so we do have experience with optimization for China. We do have data for Chinese, for the Chinese market. And for many of the companies that we work with, very large brands that are live globally, we're doing their optimization in those markets. And we think it's important to use native data. We also think it's important to have people on hand, that work with you, that speak the language, so you can validate not just, colloquially whether these keywords are correct, because data is one thing, but understanding how it's used in context is another, but also, writing it and authoring the metadata correctly. One of the challenges with ASO when you're looking at a territory like China is that Apple and Google have not, changed their algorithm in terms of how they crawl your metadata, because the language and the characters that you use are different. And so you're dealing with a situation where, characters don't work the same way as, as other languages, but Apple and Google are still trying to create combinations and still crawling your listing the same way, from right to left. So it's important to adapt that as well in a way that makes sense for the audience to read.
Great. So, the question I have is, we've it's been really busy today actually at the ASO zone, and we always thought sort of the Berlin event we do was people more interested in ASO than say London. I guess the barriers have broken down a bit, the fact it's online. But one question I have is, do you think the IDFA and iOS 14 is leading to more interest from marketers in general in organic? Is that driving more kind of strategic interest from app companies and marketers?
So for some people that we've spoken with, they've actually told us that it has become more of a priority since the IDFA issue has come up. Mostly not because they plan on disinvesting from paid channels, but mostly because they expect some degree of inefficiency to exist now in terms of their tracking for paid channels. So the better that they can do from an organic standpoint to increase their buying power on a blended basis, the more that they can, hopefully normalize whatever those inefficiencies are.
Great. And Patrick, who is from Moshi Sleep, which is a mindfulness app for kids, he says, I've heard about keyword hacks like creating a store presence in another English-speaking country to add more keywords on iOS. What are your top, any comments on that? And is your top ASO hack?
That's a good question. Number one, it is always a good idea to optimize for as many similar languages as possible or similar countries. Because at the end of the day, Apple and Google's algorithms are collecting data about your conversion and relevance, and the more you feed them, the more it starts to benefit you in terms of your rankings and indexation. What we find is there are certain territories that bleed over better than others, right? Like, for example, the US and Mexico has some clear bleed over, right? There's some clear relationships between, like, for example, the UK and Australia, but we find that takes a little longer to bleed over than something like the US and Mexico. But the more relevance that you build up, generally speaking, the better you're going to perform over time from a keyword standpoint. And just in terms of keyword hacks, right? And kind of what we usually look at from an optimization standpoint. I think, the core tenet of keyword optimization is thinking of keywords as a foundation for an optimization, but really conversion is what drives your rankings higher. And think of conversion not as just, an A/B test on your store listing, but think of it as how am I converting inside a search result. And so what we typically do is we'll look at groups of keywords in terms of, similar features, and we'll look at how a group of keywords is converting instead of just a single keyword to understand, do we have a conversion issue or do we have a metadata issue? And then we'll leverage Apple search ads to kind of A/B test our way out of those kind of problems instead of just simply rejecting a keyword because we don't rank well for it initially.
Great, good. Well, I think we've had over 50 questions today prior to this session, and we've answered a few more, and that was really interesting, especially like the idea around, using Apple search ads as an A/B testing platform, even if you're not interested in using it as a UA tool. I thought that was really interesting. The point about, your search result being what most people see rather than the actual listing, I thought was a good one. And just this idea of the App Store as a single landing page as well. Great. So, and we've had people in the chat saying thanks. It seems like you've answered their questions. Stefan has confirmed that Good Game Studios is in Hamburg. So that's good to know. I'm sorry for saying it was Berlin, but I did at least get the country right. So Dave, I think you said to head on over to gummicube.com, or dave@gummicube.com is the best place to keep track of you.
Absolutely. Those are the best places to reach out, and you can find our whole team on LinkedIn too.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for joining us from California today, Dave, and hopefully see you over in person soon, potentially in December, but you'll all be vaccinated. And
my dog says hi.
Hi. Can you bring him on stage?
I would, yeah, sure. Here, there's no better way to end something online than with a puppy. This is my puppy. His name's Flapjack. He's very interested.
Nice to meet you, Flapjack.
Sorry, guys.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
All right. Thank you.